How you doing? Yeah. Hey, how many times a day are you asked that question? How many times a week? How you doing? And honestly, you realize this, don't you, that the people that are asking that don't really care, right? They're not really interested in how you're doing at all. And if you think they are, all you need to do is start talking about how you're really doing, and you'll see their face glaze over, and you'll remember, oh, Mark was right. He's always right. Yeah, they're not really interested in how I'm doing. It's a greeting, right? So how do you typically respond to that? When somebody says, hey, how you doing? What do you say? Fine. Fine. If you've had a little chicory in your coffee that morning, you might say, great, really great. How are you? You might do that. But the fact of the matter is, it's a greeting, I understand that, but the fact of the matter is, you're not being entirely honest most of the time, right? Because you got your junk that's rolling around on the inside. We always do. We always do. I got stuff in there, and maybe I'm not doing all that great. You know what one of my standard answers is to all of that is, I got my junk, but I'm doing really good anyway. And what I mean by that is I've always got something rolling around. It seems like I've always got something there that's kind of holding me back, and I'm fretting over, and I'm doing whatever. But Jesus Christ rules. And Jesus Christ is in control. My Jesus has been raised from that grave, and there's a testimony in all of that, that His power will fill my life. And so whatever's going on here, it's of no major consequence because He's the boss. And He forever reigns. Whatever's going on in here, and it can be monumental, but whatever's going on in here, it's going to be okay because Jesus Christ rules. I got a lot of stuff rumbling around. Maybe you're kind of wondering, well, what do you have, preacher, rumbling around on the inside of you? Basically, it's the same thing as you have rumbling around inside of you. There's personal things, there's family things, there's work-related things. I happen to work for a church, but that doesn't mean it's all easy, right? You know what I'm saying? So there's stuff that rolls around in there, and all of that's okay. I can handle all that. I got some other stuff. I got some dark matter that floats around on the inside of me. Right? I'll call it fallenness for short. This is no surprise to anybody. You got it too. Stuff that rolls around in there that constantly plagues me. And I'll be honest with you, when I was younger, I thought that by the time I got to be the age that I am right now, not that I'm all that old, mind you, but I'm just saying, I thought I would have a lot of that stuff kind of whipped, that it would sort of be in the rearview mirror. And my experience is, it's not. I mean, I'm grateful. I love Psalm 25. Psalm 25 and verse 7. In fact, a lot of people love that because we have a song that we sing that bears those words. Oh, remember not. You know that song? Remember not what? The sins of my youth. Oh, remember. That's good news, and I'm thankful for that. Don't remember the sins of my youth and my rebellious ways. No, when you think about me, I want it to be according to your love, for you are good, God. Let the church say amen. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that He doesn't hang on to all that junk that I went through and then I did. I was nuts. I really was. But see, here's the thing. I started a lot of habits with that, and a lot of things got etched. Don't think for a second that every decision you make does not have a long-term impact. It really does. And so what I carry around is sometimes the result of all of that. And it messes with me. You ever heard that expression, old habits die hard? Man, that's absolutely true. Now, I want you to you know what? I'm talking about me, but I know good and well that I'm talking about you as well. Right? So I want you to hang on to something here this morning. Never let go of the grace of Jesus Christ. Your relationship with God does not rest on you getting everything right. Hear me. It does not rest on you getting everything right. It rests on the righteousness of Jesus. And that's the only thing that gets me up. It's the only thing that gets me going. I'm not saying that faithfulness to Him is not important. Of course it's important. That's why we're talking. That's why we do. But you understand, Jesus is there, and He constantly, so don't forget that. Don't forget that. Don't ever forget that. I got that stuff that rumbles around. Sometimes it kind of comes at me like, I want to please people. I'm going to be a little bit transparent up here. Are y'all okay? Can you handle? Hey, if we can't do it in here, where can we do it? I want to please people. And sometimes because of that, I don't always say what I ought to. And sometimes I do say more than maybe what's true. I'm not proud of that, but I got to deal with that. And it's constantly haunting me in there. You know, there's another part of me. I call it self-protection. There's a part of me that wants to protect myself. Now, and to some degree, we're all kind of hardwired that way. You know, the instinct to survive and all that other kind of stuff. But there's another part of it, that's self-protection. I don't want to get out there. I don't want to get hurt, right? I don't want you to hurt me. I don't want other things. And so I wind up protecting myself. And you may say, well, that's a normal, natural. Okay, well, I get that. But here's the thing about that. Here's the thing about it. You can't protect yourself and surrender yourself at the same time. Does that make sense? You can't do that. So there's this constant thing going on. Now, here's the deal. I got all this junk rumbling around here. If I'm not paying attention to it, if I kind of let it go, and sometimes the battle gets weary, right? But if I'm not paying attention to it, you know what I'm doing? I'm doing this. I'm drifting. Here's my center. Jesus is here, and I'm drifting. And the stuff that makes me drift is not stuff out there. It's in here, right? We know that, don't we? You know, it's like swimming in the Gulf off the coast of Galveston. That's what it's like. You're about waist deep in water, and you turn around. Your family's up there on the beach, and you wave, and everybody's having a big time. They're building sandcastles and stuff, and you're out here fishing or whatever it is that you're doing, and you're really kind of occupied. Or maybe you're swimming in the waves, and you're crashing them, and here you go, and you don't have the sense that you're going anywhere, right? But you look up, and in time you're messing around, and you kind of think, oh yeah, my family's here as well, and so you look up, and you say, and they're not there. Has that ever happened to you? They're not there. And they're way down there. And how did they get down there? When did you move? Well, they didn't move, right? You moved because you're in the middle of all these currents and all these pressures and all these things that push you all over the place. Now, the things that I've been describing, all those tides and all those things that push, it's in here. And if you're not paying attention, you drift. And you wind up someplace. So we're going to talk about drift here this morning. And we're going to look at a very familiar story in 2 Samuel chapter 11. Some of you already guessed who it was about when you heard 2 Samuel chapter 11. It's that kind of a story, right? It's about a man who is a man after God's own heart. What's his name? Yeah, King David. And I know you know the story, so we're not going to look at every detail of it. And I'm not even going to talk about the whole story as it goes all the way to the end, because that covers about 3 or 4 chapters. What I'm interested in is the first 17 verses of chapter 11. And here's David, and he's at a point in his story and his history where he's got a lot of history with God. Scripture calls him, of course, a man after God's own heart. And he's got the lion behind him that he killed, and he's got the bear behind him that he killed. He's got Goliath behind him. You look at that young guy, he's about 17 years old. He stands up there and he looks at Goliath right in the eye, and he says, "You've not insulted me, you've insulted the living God." Man, where did he get that faith? It's just incredible. He's got all of his dealings with Saul. He's got all of that behind him. All this stuff has transpired. See, it's all there. And now, as chapter 11 opens up, he's an established king in an established kingdom. He's living in a palace. He's got all the blessings that accrue to being a king of a great nation. He's got the respect of the nations around him. Here it is. But I want you to know that he's already started to drift. And he didn't know it. It was springtime. I love springtime. Do you love springtime? The world looks different in springtime. Karen looks different in springtime. Karen smells different in spring. That's as far as I'm going with that, all right? So there you are. But springtime, in that culture, at that time, was the time when kings go to war. Do you see that in verse 1? We're not going to put every verse up on the screen, so if you want to follow along, do that. It was that time of year when kings go to war. There's a lot of reasons for that we're not going to discuss. But what happened is David didn't go to war. David stayed in Jerusalem. I don't think every king went out to every battle ever, right? But here's the notion. I think here's what the writer wants us to understand. David wasn't really where he needed to be. He wasn't where he should have been. And he was drifting. As the drift had already started. So one spring evening, he's out on the rooftop, walking about. Wasn't on my rooftop. He would have wound up on his nose in the front yard, right? But rooftops of palaces were flat. They did a lot of entertaining up there and all that sort of thing. So he's up there walking around on the rooftop, and he looks out across the way, and he happens to see a woman taking a bath. A lot of things have changed about habits and all that sort of thing over the last 3,000 years, but here's the thing that stays the same. When you take a bath, you take all your clothes off, right? So this woman, he sees her, and immediately something is stirred on the inside. The way we're wired as males, a red-blooded Jewish guy, and he sees this beautiful woman out here, and wow, and I think he's got wives. He's got all the privilege, he's got all of this, and he sees her, and he's caught. So he begins to say, who is this woman? Somebody tell me who this woman is. It's a little bit unclear in the NIV exactly how all of that came about, but it appears as if he's describing her, and somebody says, well, that's Bathsheba. There's nobody, you know the story, right? There's nobody as beautiful, that you can't be talking about anybody else but Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. And the active words in that are wife of Uriah the Hittite. Do you know who Uriah the Hittite was? It was one of David's buds. He was part of the 30, as they're called in the Old Testament. Also referred to as the mighty men. Sometimes just called the mighty for short. These were the folks that stood right, these were the crack troops. These 30, there were actually 37 of them, but they were called the 30, the mighty men. These were the guys that stood by David thick or thin. These are the guys that would die for David without even thinking about it. Without even thinking about it. Oh, that's Bathsheba. Beautiful woman, maybe the most beautiful woman in Jerusalem. She's married to your buddy Uriah the Hittite. What does David say? Remember, he's drifting. What does he say? Fetch her. He's king. Who's going to stop the king? Fetch her. He did it because he could do it, right? He did it just because he could. Fetch her. And the point of all of that, pretty straightforward. It's made kind of nice when you look at the NIV, but it's pretty, in the Hebrew, it's kind of abrupt. He fetched her to have sex with her. That's it. That's all it was. She goes through the period of cleansing. She goes back home. No harm, no foul, right? You're king. But then she gets a message back, 3 little words. I am pregnant. He's got a problem on his hands because Uriah the Hittite has not been in town for a long time because it's the spring of the year and he's been out fighting David's war. He's been out fighting David's battle. He's loyal to the king. Loyal. See, loyal to the king. He's not there. It could not be Uriah's baby. Boy, oh boy. Self-protection begins to set in. So he hatches a plan. He sends a message to Joab, that's his commander-in-chief, sends this message to Joab, says, send Uriah back home. You don't question the king. Joab just sends him back home. And when he gets there, if you look down around verses 6 and 7, they're having some conversation, and David is asking him, well, how's the battle going? How's the war? What's going on with Joab? What's the troops like? How's everything been going? You know, like it's a download of, kind of an update on all that's happening. And after that's all over, then David says, well, okay, so you're here. Why don't you go home? This is a little leave. You go home, take your mind off of stuff. And by the way, here's a little care package I'm going to send you, a little gift I'm going to send home with you. Maybe, I don't know what was in there. Maybe some bread and cheese, and maybe a bottle of wine was in there. You go home to your beautiful wife because who can resist her? You go home. But here's what happened. Uriah didn't go home. And it's reported to David the next day that he spent the night with the servants in the palace, by the door of the palace. He just slept on the floor. David said, what are you doing? Have you not been gone for a long time, he said? Have you not really, and you're back home? What are you doing sleeping here at the palace on the floor? And here's what Uriah said to him, verse 11. The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open fields. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. A man of loyalty, a man of commitment, God and country. That's what he was all about. There should have been a spot right there where David looked at that and said, whoop. See, when you're drifting, you don't really care what you know. In fact, you don't really pay attention to that stuff. And what it meant to David was plan B. So he goes to plan B. He says, look, you know what? Don't need to go back today. Why don't you stay a little bit longer? Spend the day with me. We'll celebrate. He actually wound up spending 2 days with him. It says David got him drunk. And the notion was, get you drunk enough, all your inhibitions come down, everything is, and so you'll go home and you'll do what I need you to do, all right? So I can't just come out of jail. So here, get drunk, drink all you want to drink, and then you'll surely go home. But it still didn't happen. Man, too much integrity, too much personal value. So David goes to plan C, and plan C is to send a note to Joab and say, I want you to go where the battle is the fiercest and the strongest, and you run up to that front line, be sure Uriah the Hittite is there with you, and at the right moment you withdraw, and you know the end of the story. Let him die. So David murdered one of the 30. Now, I want you to know something real quick. This is not a story about sex. It's not about adultery. Well, it is. I mean, those are the items. That's the machination, the instruments through which all this story comes. But that's not what the story is about. The story is about heart. It's not about sex. It's about heart. And it's about a drifting heart. And it's about the power of the drift. See? Jesus makes mention of it in Matthew 18. And he speaks pretty much to the point. He's speaking to a bunch of religious people. Some of those religious people ever lived in the entire world, Pharisees, Sadducees, the Jews of that day. And he says to them in Matthew chapter 15, they're arguing about some little traditional kinds of thing. And he says, he quotes Isaiah, actually. And Isaiah's not really born for another 250, 300 years after David's story. But people don't change much, right? That's how I know that you and I are a lot alike. And we got to struggle with the same kinds of things that David had to struggle with. And he quotes Isaiah. And Isaiah says in Matthew 15 and verse 8, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart has drifted. Do you know how that happens? Let's break this down here just for a second. It happens because there's a part of me that Paul calls sarx. It's a Greek word. It literally means flesh. And sometimes flesh means this stuff on the bones. But usually Paul uses it metaphorically, and he's using it to describe our nature, our fallen nature, our sinful nature, our lustful nature. It's the part where the lust of the eyes and the pride of life and all those things that John talks about in his book, the book of 1 John. It's where all that is. See, sarx is the bulkhead of sin. Sarx is how sin gets inside of you. And sin is like a mosquito. This is the biblical definition. It doesn't say it's like a mosquito. What it says is that sin is deceitful. It'll blind you. It'll blind you to the fact that you're blind to it. It's like a mosquito, because when a mosquito sticks you, you feel that little sting sometimes, right? That's when he first gets there. Because what he does, he injects you, first of all, with a little anesthesia. So he can sit there and suck the blood right out of you. Right? Sin is that same kind of way. The bulkhead is sarx, and it comes in, and it anesthetizes. It's just the way it works. And you don't know what you know. You can't see about yourself. Are you drifting? Let me say this. If you're not paying attention to yourself, if you're not paying attention to these tidal waves that are going on the inside, you're drifting. Moving away from center. I'm not saying you're going to do what David did. Again, it's not about sex. It's about heart. Right? You're moving, and you don't realize it. Right? Let's just think about this just for a second. I want to give you a couple of signs of the drift, because we're typically, by nature, blind to it. All right? Let me give you a couple of signs here. Let's start off with this. Here's the first one. You start to ignore the evidence of spiritual problems that are in your life. You know something's not right? You know something's not exactly there, but you don't pay any attention to it. And and by the way, let me tell you about these signs. These signs, I'm lifting them out of the story. I'm not going to turn and look at verse this or verse that as we go through it. But I'm going to tell you, these come out of the story. They come out of my own experience and struggle with my junk. All right? And a lot of stuff, a lot of research. Okay? All right. So you ignore the evidence of spiritual problems. And I don't mean that you ignore. You know what you do? You rationalize, or you minimize, or you deny. That's part of that anesthesia that goes in there. And we don't pay attention. How do spiritual problems pop up? They don't usually pop up with Satan and horns and a pitchfork and all that, right? Because that would be unnerving. But it comes about in other kinds of ways. Take a look here. Let me just look at these. This is not all of it, right? But here's a good kind of a example. If you're, like, for example, angrier than you used to be. You can see it. Here's the thing. A lot of angry people that I've known don't know they're angry. I say, but you got a sense of it. It's not that you explode all the time. Do you know what I do when I'm really overwhelmed with anger? I withdraw. I pull away, right? But is anger bad? No, it's not. It's not. But you're angrier than you used to be. You know, it's not. Something's going on. Something's going on. Could it be as practical as that? You bet. How about this? Constantly complaining about the people in your life. There's a sign something's going on. And you might say, well, you know what? They're jerks. Let's be honest with you. They're jerky. Okay. But watch that minimizing. Watch that rationalization. Growing distance between you and those closest to you, especially if you're married and it's a spouse. Something's not right. You're moving away. Non-existent devotional life. Let me tell you how important, and boy, we rationalize that because we're busy or we're this or we're that or whatever, and man, listen. You were made to worship. That's why we're here. And you will worship something. Yes, you will. And it's either the living God through a resurrected Jesus or it's idolatry. And if you're not spending time, you don't have a devotional life going on, you are adrift. You're absolutely adrift. Number 5, numbing out. Maybe you're drinking. Maybe it's hours and hours in front of a TV or a computer screen. Is a TV? You know what? I love a good movie. I'm just saying, what's going on with you? Pay attention to the signs. Pay attention to the signs. You're numbing out. Number 6, you're giving non-answers to personal questions. You're sidestepping. You know what? You just don't. You're not going to. People that may be concerned about you, that are asking about, and you do the. I'm not the only one that knows how to dance here, am I? You give non-answers. You sidestep. You don't let anybody in. That's a big mistake, because you don't let anybody in, you're really in trouble. Your need for approval from other people. You need approval from other people to have inner peace. You know what? That we want to be like. That's not necessarily bad, right? But if you can't feel okay about yourself unless you have it, that's a sign. That's a sign. There's a spiritual problem going on. All right, so let's go back. There's other things that we could talk about, but I just kind of give a general sort of thing here. Go back here. Ignoring the evidence of spiritual problems. There's 5 other things that I want to share with you. You stop listening to those closest to you. Always a mistake. There's a growing disconnect between your private life and your public persona. I mean, what you are here in this room is not the same as who you are when you're by yourself. I realize we got everybody's got their masks, I guess, that I'm talking about, but you know what I'm talking about. It's not, there's no authenticity. There's not much genuineness there. There's you're drifting. You're increasingly empty spiritually. Maybe you can't quite put your finger, but you know it's not there. Something's missing. And then you start to grind out the duties of life if for no other reason you don't know what else to do. You've lost your joy. And somehow or another, I don't think it's an accident, but here's the real deal about worship. You probably are aware of this because we've talked about it before, but worship is not something that really happens. Only one time is it ever used in that connection in the New Testament to describe what goes on in this room. The rest of the time it's describing life and serving, and your life is worship. Sometimes you get you've drifted, see? And you grind it out, you stick with it. Thank God for that, but you're doing it because you don't really know what else to do. And then you begin to live in silence and isolation, particularly if you've got to have a lot of approval. And if people find out what they really know, it's risky, see, to do something like that. And so you cut yourself off from community. Now look, that's really just about all we got time to absorb. It's all we can absorb. But I can't just leave it like that. I want to give you just a brief little thing, what we're going to talk about over the next several weeks. All right? I want to give you, here it is, kind of in short form, a remedy short list. Okay, here's where we're going to talk. Let me tell you how to deal with it. And there's other pieces to it than just this. Okay, but here's how you deal with it. Number one, you get a devotional life. Quit messing around and acting like other things are more important. Don't you do that. You know what preachers typically do? They'll do a devotional life, but they're always prepping. I'm always prepping. I'm always do it for you. Get a devotional life. Listen, daily you have to admit your need and your brokenness. Spend some time doing that. Let God reveal it to you. And here, if I'm going to put a star by anything up here, it's going to be this one. Daily meditate on the grace of Jesus. Because you'll never make it otherwise. You're sunk. I said something a minute ago. I want to say it again right here. My relationship with God, your relationship with God, does not rest on you getting it right. It rests on the righteousness of Jesus. And if you think you're in a deep old pit, maybe you are. But the grace of Jesus Christ is deeper than any pit you will ever get into. You can't turn loose of that. You can't let go of that. It's got to be there. It's got to be there. Number two, feed on God's Word. It is restorative. It is powerful. Whatever tools you might need to do, we'll talk about some of that a little bit later on. And number three, find somebody you can confide in. Be accountable to them. Back in the 60s and 70s, when I was kind of growing up, actually 50s, 60s, 70s when I was growing up, church was a matter, here's what it was. You go to church on Sunday, you go to church on Wednesday, and nobody ever said anything about, you know what, where we went to church, nobody knew what was going on with my dad or my mom or me. The only thing that mattered was, are you there on Sunday? That's not the only thing that mattered. I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I want to tell you, culturally, the emphasis was kind of on learning a lot of stuff, and yeah, coming together is important, but living life together kind of got lost in the wash somewhere. We were just as much a victim of culture then as we tend to be right now. You can't take culture out of church. Just read the New Testament. It's all culturally bound up. I want to tell you, you need to have somebody that you can confide in. Autonomous Christianity never works. And that's not His design. His design is that we grow through community. We do it together. You got to be accountable to somebody. And I want you to know that means being confessional. And there's got to be somebody you're talking to. Listen, let me just tell you this. Somebody that you got to be talking to. Here's the thing. The reality and confession of spiritual weakness is not dangerous. It's not dangerous. Because everybody's spiritually weak. I am, you are, everybody is. The reality and confession of spiritual weakness is not dangerous. It is healing. God uses bent and broken tools to build His kingdom. That's the end of the story. That's it, right there. Find somebody you can confide in. If you're having trouble doing that, come see me. Be a part of an account. We just can't do this alone. You can't. Now, here it is. I'm done with this. So here it is. This is, you know what happens if you do this? You get real. You get real. And you stop the drift. And that's good news. Right. So maybe there's some things you need to share, right, today with your elders. I'm going to ask our elders and their wives to go to various places about the building if you would do that. Anything you need to share with them, you share with them. We're going to stand, we're going to sing together. If it's something that needs to become public, they'll let somebody know, and we'll do that. But just, all right, let's get real. So we stand and sing.
As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds His people. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds His people. Surround us, Lord. surrounds